While considerably less focused than last week's controversial chapter, we do get quite a lot of material to work with and a considerable development with the Ice Oni virus crisis. Is there a better name to describe that? Maybe not, but these are my thoughts on and review for One Piece Manga Chapter 1006, titled The Honorable Hyogoro the Flower. Now, before I do my deep dive into my full thoughts on this week's events, I do actually want to touch on last week's chapter very briefly since life kind of prevented my usual review last time. And I loved seeing the growth in Robin's character, in her trust in the Straw Hats, as well as Sanji showing some growth, calling for help and taking his own advice to Usopp from back in Enna's lobby and taking that to heart. And I'll dig into that whole controversial in its own separate video, but it did kind of need to be mentioned a little bit because while we don't get a follow-up to Robin versus Black Maria, we do get to see Sanji having to consider if he's needed more helping out the Scabbards or if Momo and Shinobu needs his help. And while he does make up his mind within the chapter, we don't know what decision he actually made. Personally, I'm going to bet on Momo, simply because none of the Scabbards would probably forgive Sanji if he exposed Momo to more danger to help them instead, because after the beating that they've taken from Kaido, they might not exactly be so attached to life. I mean, remember, they full-on went into that fight expecting to either win or die. So they might not be in the best mental state, and the only thing left they have would be Momo. So exposing Momo to danger would just be more insult to the wound. You know, salt on the wound, whatever the actual fucking saying is. Now, while we're on the topic of brutal losses, due to the excessive clouds, which I'm assuming are flame clouds, just blocking the moon, unfortunately Carrot and Wanda have reverted from their Sulong forms and have been laid the fuck out by Perospero. I'm assuming maybe it was like mid-blow, that's when the rising of Onigashima kind of just took over the sky with all the clouds lifting the whole friggin' island up. That's probably when they reverted out of their forms and probably mid-strike. And it probably went all downhill from there, and that's where we see all the candy spikes in the floor, Wanda completely unconscious, and Carrot barely hanging on. On that note, surprisingly, Perospero didn't outright kill them, but not surprising, because given his personality, he's really only shown true killing intent towards Marco, who he has a long-standing history with. Now, Perospero has always been written in a more sadistic manner, so his taunting and discarding of Carrot is actually quite in character for him. And once again, his hate boner for Marco kind of draws his attention towards the former Whitebeard pirate, whose hands are quite full holding off two guys worth over $1 billion at once, as he puts it. And this direct comment does hint not only at the still unknown bounties of King and Queen, or at least giving us a minimum, although, Jack's bounty kind of gave us that minimum a long time ago, but nonetheless, it also hints at what kind of bounty does Marco have, because just wonder how much he's worth if he's truly capable of this much. Of course, he's still visibly running low on stamina, drawing all of King and Queen's attacks towards him. Hell, he even stops Queen from shooting off his own laser towards the samurai below, which is pretty interesting, but maybe I'll deep dive into the cyborg workings of Queen another time. But he also shows more of his actual fighting style, a lot of movement and momentum, not just with his claws, but using the momentum of flight and gravity to strike with his knees and propel himself with the fire. And he also manipulates the fire to create kind of smaller shockwave attacks, as Queen hints at, because, there has to be some way for him to use it offensively if it can't burn, and if it has some sort of physical form, then the least he can do is just harden it or kind of disperse it in a quick manner for either blunt attacks or, in this case, shockwave attacks. So it does work, and it's quite the unique way of fighting with fire. And speaking of burning, it's actually hard to tell if the fire pattern on Hyogoro is actually the flames from Marco or just Hyogoro's, fully transformed hair. And honestly, his return to Prime is kind of just written as his body using the rest of his life to resist the virus. And that's not bad by any means. I mean, do we have a full explanation for Django's hypnosis powers back in Syrup Village or Mrs. Golden Week's color traps? No, we don't. So we don't actually need a full-on explanation for every single thing. Like, people don't complain about those two other things not getting a more in-depth view. Like, how does Django's hypnosis work? Fuck, people usually forget those two characters exist. So it's not that big of a deal in a scale of things. I mean, it probably will be a nitpick for most weekly reviewers and a lot more detail-orientated fans right now, but it won't be in a few weeks. We'll forget about it. It really doesn't matter. And honestly, I think the results of the transformation are more than enough to make up for it, because he basically one-shots the fuck out of, Hoitei and the Mina Warigumi, and with just his flaming hair of Holy Rage Strike, which is a fucking beautiful panel. Like, his power is so, not to quote Dragon Ball, but it's maximumer. And, given how Buffy gets out of nowhere, yeah, I guess it's kind of fitting. And it actually is what takes Queen's attention very briefly and foolishly off of Marco. But the real focus isn't the strength of Hyogoro. It is the fact that he is staring death right in the face, not just from burning off what remains of his lifespan, but from the fact that the virus will still try and kill him the moment his stamina runs out and Marco's flames can no longer, effectively keep him sane. And he actually does have, the samurai around him promise to kill him if it gets to that point, which the last panel basically is just him about to have his head chopped off as, the Ice Oni virus does unfortunately start to take over. Marco's flames have run their course. Everyone is out of stamina. But like I said, the focus was the fact that he was staring, death in the face, juxtaposed to the occasional panels of Chopper working on the cure. And I feel that this is all building towards Chopper opening chapter 1007 with the cure and saving Hyogoro. I know I mispronounced his name at least 5 different times. Maybe not every time, but I know I've mispronounced it a shit ton. But we don't have to wait long for the answer to how will Hyogoro continue surviving. I probably butchered it again. Long story short, no break next week. Yay! Yeah. And out of all the recent cliffhangers we have, this isn't one of those types that we can simply jump away from and come back 2 months later. So we probably will be getting an answer for once in the, next chapter in a few days. So, booyah. So what did you all think of this chapter? Was seeing Marco in action up to your expectations? Do you really think Carrot and Wanda are down for the count? And what development will Pero Sparrow and his hate boner bring to the table? Let's talk in the comments below. I love discussing this stuff with the community. It also helps the channel out. And also don't forget to leave a like and subscribe if you're interested. I've been Smalls of Black Knight Anime and Manga. Till next time, stay safe.